Hello Internet, it's time for a special Wednesday serial. This time I wanted to talk about something that I just finished, so talk about it while it's in the moment for me, and that is nothing new at all. In fact, this comic was made in 1988, It is the new Teen Titans The Judas Contract, obviously collected, and I just want to talk about it because it was such a amazing read for me. Now, there's comics that you come across when you start getting into comics, not so much because it grabbed your eye or that there's something about it, but because you've just heard so many times that it's just one of those comics you should read. And for me, The Judas Contract was one of them, but I never really cared about the Teen Titans. But I always thought, I'd get around to it one day because I heard it was a decent arc, and that day has arrived. So, there you go. What really grabbed me about this arc, though, was that for everything that the Teen Titans is supposed to do, as far as being a superhero comic, feels like it's encapsulated better in this arc in a grander scale and a smaller scale than probably most any other Teen Titans book is. And so for that, I just found it kind of fascinating, kind of makes me afraid, actually, to tread more into it, because I feel like, considering this is, such a creme de la creme for that book, that nothing else would quite, measure up for me. Nothing else would be as good. So I don't know about any of that. The only other Teen Titans I've really read was from the Jeff Johns era, and then slightly beyond that. So what I know is some of the newer stuff, more when it was really Titans, but it was Teen Titans brought back to just bring a few new younger characters. Another thing that made this book a more interesting read for me is you get to have an intro from the creators, Marv Wolfman and George Perez. No small names there. And clearly this is one of those books that gave them that stature. And it was really interesting to hear them talk about it. And I feel you'll hear from anyone working on these books at the time, whether it's these guys or Chris Claremont, that there, more than anything else, there was a Marvel versus DC going on, and in the best way. Certainly not like what we have now, where there was this very staunch competition. Everyone felt Teen Titans in some ways was aping X-Men, but once you got to there, they felt X-Men took a bit from Teen Titans, and there was a bit of a rivalry going on. People felt, it was the kind of same idea, just the different side of the coin on that one. And so there's a lot of weird pressure in creating these books, but probably a good, competition, a good creative mix, and get that going. But in this book, it's played on in a few ways that are really interesting. One of the more interesting ones is when Jericho, a character that's introduced, it said that he's a mutant, which is something you don't hear in DC, and was a very clear kind of dig at X-Men, because with all these superpowered characters running around, and being actually more of a community than Marvel is in a lot of ways, because they're all just kind of thrown together, especially in something like Teen Titans. You just have this line where mutants, yeah, I heard they were pretty good people, just this kind of weird little aside to that sort of thing, and seeing how they play up. And everything done with Tara was actually a really interesting take on that. Though from here on out, I'm just going to have to say it's spoilers for a book from 1988, so no one cares. So, the Judas Contract, clearly the biblical idea there, stab her in the back, is talking about Tara, who is this lovely young woman. Not at all, actually. That's one of the most interesting things. She's actually drawn kind of like a chut, which is amazing, because you don't see that. And here's this girl who's purposely drawn, not, flat-chested, but like A-cup, B-cup, and just... and she smokes, and she throws on makeup, which makes her look kind of more like a whore than good, and she takes a lot of digs at Starfire for having an amazing bod and brains too, and she's like, what the hell? And she's really vindictive even when she's playing the good part. Her role, I'm sure you've heard, is that she was signed on by Deathstroke to infiltrate the Teen Titans and then to gather information so that she could help Deathstroke take them down. And to go further back, which was something I'd heard of but forgot, Deathstroke was always on the Teen Titans' back because he took a contract to take them out and bring them to Hive, and it was the contract that he never fulfilled. Now, I'm not sure if it was played out later, but he actually did more or less fulfill this contract, with the exception of technically Kid Flash and then Robin. Now, going back to Kid Flash, was something interesting about the grandeur that I was talking about, metamorphosis of this book. Initially, when the Teen Titans came out, of which I'm sure next to nothing's worth reading, it was just all the sidekicks were thrown together in a book to make, Justice Junior League, as it's referred to earlier, and, who cares? It's just the kids, and they can't deal with greater threats because you don't want someone, murdering children as such. Well, maybe you do. That's not socially acceptable, right? Even for, within a comic book constraint, especially during the time of the Code and whatnot. Of course, who could die during the day of the Code? So, you move on, and then it's the new Teen Titans. They kind of slowly dealt with it, but it was interesting the cast that they eventually developed with. And Kid Flash left because he was going on a metamorphosis, and it was so interesting to see Wally, because I've heard that he was Kid Flash, but I've never actually seen him more in that role. It was kind of interesting to realize how much DC's kind of allowed some characters to really progress, which is interesting because now you have Nightwing as a full-bodied, his own character. Flash has gone through this whole deal, whereas Flash has reversed, seeing now Nightwing and Batman more or less at the same stature is bizarre due to the fact that Batman should be ancient. But such is comics and the rubber band time theory. So you move on, but you have mostly not new, but exclusive characters. I mean, you have Cyborg, who looks weird. I don't know what's with robots in like the 80s, but I'm glad they got looking cooler. You have Starfire, and then you have Raven, also interesting from like the female perspective thing. Like, she looks like a goth chick and dour, and like she's not trying to pretty anything up. And again, she's not pretty, which is great. It's great actually to see these different body types drawn. It makes me kind of sad for the way we are with comic art now. I mean, it's nice that you have Starfire there, but when you have someone who's that impossibly alien for that, which makes kind of sense because people who are like that are effectively mutants, next to, people with amazing powers but not, gifted up and down, left and right, just makes it feel so much more interesting. And then you have Robin, and then you have Beast Boy, who they refer to as Gar a lot more. I mean, I knew he was Garfield, but I always heard him as Beast Boy, and then I guess they tried Changeling out for a while, which makes more sense to me, but I guess Beast Boy stuck. Whatever. And Terra, and then Wonder Girl, and eventually they work in Jericho. And you see that cast, and I mean, how many are really sidekicks? I mean, Kid Flash, who leaves, Robin, then to Nightwing, which is a big part of this story, then Wonder Girl, who really isn't so much part of anything. So that was just really interesting to realize, something that started off eventually really became its own cast with a few cast-offs. And really the biggest connection at that point to other books was Nightwing, which was purposely moving away from being Robin so that he could be more his own character. And that was just so interesting, so much about, this idea of Teen Titans, the idea of growing up and becoming your own person is so much grander and what you'd like to think that age is all about, but is not, at least not anymore because of the way we regulate things. So I imagine it made a lot more sense in the 80s, because later, with my generation and whatnot, things are too regulated, and that's just not really the case. And I don't really think even the idealized case anymore, because now a lot of what used to be the teenage and high school years is now transferred onto more the late, like 18, 19, but more like 20s and whatnot, in that age, and then college, or not college, whatever, and going and finding yourself there. So, This trade starts us off early enough that we get to see the Titans take on Brother Blood in this whole cult deal where they're transferring leadership, and you see Dick shying away from being Robin, trying to deal with, what am I going to call myself? What's my costume going to be? Which I find weird that he doesn't just have like a placeholder, like a Spider-Man bag over your head and call it a day or something. I don't know. But they do that for a little dramatic tension, that's fine. And you see them deal with this whole bizarre thing where Brother Blood's mesmerizing people, and no one's really believing these damn upstart teens that have saved the world who knows how many times. And they eventually kind of reveal that it's a cult and save the day, and Tara's in on it and saving them and building her relationship with Beast Boy, all the while reporting to Deathstroke. And you see Deathstroke in this very odd way where he's just himself, not Deathstroke, but Slade Wilson. And he's sitting back and he's reflecting on his family. And it's weird because, you think of this weird mercenary killer as, lone wolf, and seeing him there and kind of being a gentleman of leisure is a bizarre take. Maybe it wasn't so much for the time, but it sure was for me. And seeing him reflect, you can tell he's reflecting on days past, but they don't say anything. And it's just such an interesting take, and you see Tara commenting on that and acting like a bratty 16-year-old, and they have a fight, and he sees how powerful she's become, but she's always wearing this whorish makeup whenever she's around him. It's like, take that off, the heroes don't wear that, and you're gonna blow your cover, which is just one of those interesting little bits. And in another side to the X-Men and of that age, you have an issue from there to them just training. You get to see them have a bit more of their lives, and you have this bit about Cyborg pushing himself to the match and not just being regulated by machines, but lifting more than he supposedly should, and burning himself out and being like, I can do 110%, and it's his only story arc. And you see Wonder Girl and Starfire training and fighting and having this good rivalry, and then you get to Beast Boy and Tara having a little fight, and he pokes way too much fun at her, and she loses it and starts trying to kill him until they calm her down. You get this kind of glimpse. You also have this moment with Raven. She passes by, she's like, maybe I'm just dealing with my own stuff, but I sense something. And you're like, yeah, maybe you should act on that or talk about it. But they have this whole, she kind of like overanalyzes the situation, her being Raven, and says, since I can't verify, I won't bring up anything to anyone, because if I'm wrong, it would be bad for everyone involved, but there's something. And being all weird and goth and antisocial and introverted, which is an important lesson to take away, kids. It's important to come out of your shell. But then Tara, with the help of Deathstroke, takes out most of the Titans, and then Dick gets away, and there's this whole bit about why Dick is the best of the Titans, because he's had to work from everything, and whereas people get used to their powers and rely on it too much, he's always had to be perfect, so he can't be sloppy, and that's why he's so tactically great and whatnot, which is interesting, because as a parallel back, he's the leader of the Titans, and taking on that role, and they explain why he's important. And it's, of course, very akin to why Batman's important to the Justice League. But Batman being as important as he is to the Justice League always feels like such a goof. Because he's Batman, he's antisocial, he works with his people, never really alone. And it just feels fake. Like, if you have Superman, The Flash, and other great tactical minds, Batman's smart, but really what should he be bringing to the table? And they always seem to play down everyone else's intelligence to make Batman seem more intelligent in those cases, and that always feels like kind of a charade, whereas with Dick, he plays with everyone's strengths, but he's so great at working with the team and being the actual, tactical leader. He's kind of taking cue, which they also point on here, from Superman as well as Batman in those respects, and in a lot of ways, you know, within a superhero sense, is a better character than Batman in a lot of respects, even though they always play with Batman because he sells more books. But then Dick is approached by a strange woman and a blonde boy, and she sits back to tell him why she knows that he is indeed the Boy Wonder, even if he is the Boy Wonder no longer, and tells him a story about a certain Slade Wilson and how he came to be the man that he called the Terminator. And this is the kind of issue that normally draws me out, but this was different. This made Deathstroke the Terminator far more interesting. Actually gave him a far more interesting tale on why he's so nutsoid. And you get this crazy war story about a man that's performing great but needs to be taken under this woman commander's lead, and does so willingly in an age and, you know, military mindset where following a woman is crazy. What do they know? And learns all these advanced techniques, and they have this interesting bit about actually learning in a combat situation to focus on your surroundings and to sometimes be a touch more wild so that you can deal with that which is around you rather than a linear focus on a man-on-man. And that was fascinating. But you see this man who's dedicated to being the best soldier he can go under an experiment, kind of in a weird parallel, more way that I think Captain America would work, where they try something that's supposed to be lighter and ends up enhancing his metabolism and speed, you know, becomes a Captain America level character, but is asked to resign from the army because they can't let this out and they can't deal with the repercussions that it would cause for... It's not exactly laid out, but there's a multitude of reasons. When you think about the implications, it's actually an interesting idea from a political standpoint, if that was to just happen today. Like how you wouldn't want to herald that, you'd want to keep that under wraps. So he resigns and is supposed to live a life of comfort with his wife under the guise that he was alright for a time, but then became weaker and needed to have an outlet. It turns out that he's been talking to dignitaries and whatnot and became Deathstroke the Terminator, a mercenary for hire, because all he knows is soldiering, and since he's left to his own devices, he becomes a soldier of fortune. And with a touch more gravitas, not because he needs to be a supervillain, but because he needs to have a personality and cover himself so that he's not known or associated to A, the army, or B, to anyone that would know him. So he becomes this, but he also takes more pride in this than anything else, which is telling when you find out about Jericho, the blonde boy, about how he was this beautiful, lovely little kid, and one of two that was raised. That you find out later he has a daughter, but that's not really brought up. And there becomes this hostage situation where there's a guy with a knife to the kid's throat, and he thinks he can take him because, haha, he's Deathstroke the Terminator, and the kid gets split in the neck and then can't talk ever again, which... I don't know, is that how that works? I was pretty sure because of the way you can get trachs, if it heals you should be okay, but I don't know. Anyways, turns out Jericho's a mutant and has the ability to look at you and then inhabit your body and control your movements, but can only speak to you through their words since you're inhabiting... I don't quite fully explain it, but okay, interesting. And also interesting is able to do the whole mind control thing whilst having his body gone. Interesting little take, and I finally got why that character was cool, because every time I've seen him, you know, character design wise, he looks lame. I mean, that character design is lame. I mean, look at him here. Just, lame pink boots. Though to be fair, Nightwing, yellow frill and the V-cut douchey, a little douchey. Not gonna. I know it's the '80s, but with the yellow trim and the V, even then, let's be honest. A, those colors clash. I mean, you have the baby blue on the dark blue and then the yellow. I know fashion isn't always covert, but there is a happy middle, and yellow is neither with the baby blue. Okay. And I know we're diverging, but while we're talking about it, Tara's costume, I know it's just a quick hash together thing, but come on. Vertical lines lead your eyes down, and if you're not working with a lot here, you gotta, make something pop, and if you don't really have an act, I don't think you want it hanging out. I think you want, a little lift, a little separate, a little, I'm not saying, and not everything has to be all booty out. I mean, there's other ways to work. Look at Wonder Girl. Really, on the back end, not working with a lot, but the stars, distract and make you think there's a little more going on, and, much wiser fashion choice, and it's just around. We're not even going out into the world of DC, not to mention Marvel. I mean, let's be honest, guys. Marvel, better designs pretty much every time. Sad but true. Oh, where was I? Anyways, yeah, Jericho goes in the neck and can't talk and blah, and anyways, Mommy Dearest, the lady who confronts not Robin, is the ex-wife, who is the reason why Deathstroke only has one eye, because she shot it out with a gun. I don't think you need papers at that point. I think that's just divorce by barrel. So, that's awesome. And also one of the most justified, greatest, and coolest, and most, hell yeah, domestic disputes I've ever read. That is just, go divorce in that case. And the other part that I find really awesome about that whole Deathstroke story, which is just one comic in here, is it's really told through the guise of a war story, and you're pulling so far out of the Teen Titans area. And that makes it so much stronger. Like, normally it's because the villain, is not them and happy or whatever. But no, I mean, you have Teen Titans in this weird superhero world, but you see that Deathstroke the Terminator is a war vet. And that's where he's coming in. That's why, I mean, really, he's just trying to get his job done, fulfill a contract. That's how soldiers are. I mean, a good soldier follows orders and gets the job done. And whereas that's not sympathetic, it makes him a more understandable character, at least in that respect, finally. So you get this super villain, you get some of the color and whatnot, and you see the purpose behind that, because it's an identity issue at that point. Even though he's able to pull back and still be this playboy, he understands himself and finds himself useful in there, and he's taken a job, and he's going to do it, and he doesn't care. But what's interesting is they bring the Teen Titans to Hive, sans Kid Flash, because he's not a Titan anymore, so he says, well, you can pay me extra, but I'm not going to do that, which is whatever. Also kind of interesting, because you imagine that would be the hardest one to catch, but I guess it would be like Trank Dart, and you drag him in, so still call bull on that. And then, because, Trank working through a Flash would be gone in like 10 minutes, right? Anyways. So they bring in, and then you have Tara who's lipping off, and you see her smoking there in front of the Titans. They're all like, Tara, why? And no one's thinking she's 16. That's as tall as she's going to get. Like, so, few things happen. Jericho inhabits his father's body while Deathstroke's figuring out, because he thought this, he forgot about his kid, basically. Now he's there in his face, and lets him do whatever, like, doesn't resist him in any way. And the Titans start being freed, and kind of had this weird moment where the Deathstroke the Deathstroke, Slade, realizes that, he's let down his son once and he felt bad about it, but he needed to do it for professional reasons, but he's kind of seen that maybe that was too far, and then realizes that he needs to get Jericho out alive, no matter what now. And then Tara flips out because she doesn't know diddly or about Jericho, and just assumes, rightfully so, that Deathstroke's Henry can whoop ass. Except she doesn't notice that his fighting style is like 40% of what it normally is. Like, decent, but not, Batman with no regard for mortality. So she flips out and starts raising hell, or, at least the earth around everyone starts freaking out, and so Deathstroke has a little inner monologue with his son. I think that's the way you say that, right? That situation is beyond the English language. I'd like to point that out, so any grammatical corrections you have, I'm taking with a grain of salt on that one, because it's in his head, but he's talking to someone else. He's not, well, he is crazy, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, he has an internal monologue with his son, who's inhabiting his body, with his body in his mind. Comics are weird. And figures out that Jericho needs to leave the Terminator so the Terminator can whoop Tara's ass, so that he can live, and then also the Teen Titans escape. However, I would like to point out, Deathstroke did still fulfill his contract, because he brought in the kids to Hive. The Hive was doing their mumbo frickin' jumbo. They had plenty of time to cap them in the face. They see things start going downhill. They're like, man, these kids get out of a lot of rough situations. Maybe if we just shoot them now, No. Bad guys on bad guys here. Slade fulfilled his contract. Whatever, he should be done. I don't know how that played out later. But anyway, Slade gets knocked out, and then Tara's freaking out, causing, like, an earth windstorm, and just, like, it's a tornado of rocks, which, don't go near that. And, the Titans are trying to calm her down, and they have this bit where they pull out, and they just break the fourth wall straight out, like, under, like, most any circumstances, this would be considered bad writing. But the way they use the device is actually really intriguing. One of the few ways you can get away with it. I don't know if they had any reservations about this or not, but I'm just telling you from a writer's perspective, don't do that unless you know it's going to work out. And hopefully they knew it was going to work out. They pull back and they say, here is a girl, not a woman, 16 years old. Never taught anything, never really in such a bad situation, but she's filled with hate, with, just the need to destroy, be terrible, be evil, essentially. And it's interesting because, you get good and evil, but rarely is it framed in such a way that's kind of like, yeah, she's not good people. And, she was given every opportunity to, turn around and see, like with good, good things can come. Sometimes it's not always easy, but she's just filled with hate, and she just literally, like, consumes herself and kills herself. She buries herself under a pile of rock, and they try to dig her out, and she is just KO, done. And because of that breakaway, the narrative just breaks to the audience. You see the Titans' reaction, and they're like, and Garfield, Beast Boy, who's been in love with her, basically, probably because she was the more attainable girl, and we could go into the romantic relations of how that works and how that breaks down what they're trying to represent. But anyways, he was falling for her, and he's like, no, Slade had to have made her evil. She wasn't just like this, whatever. And Raven's kind of reserved, but knows not to really say anything. But Nightwing is kind of like, just let it be. Nothing good comes from pushing it. And Tara, of course, is like step whatever to Geoforce, who's just the male pretty equivalent. They don't tell him that she betrayed them. and just lets the funeral happen. That's where we close out. It's on the funeral, and on the headstone you see that she was a Titan, you know, and then her presumed birth and then death dates, which is something I kind of think would be smarter to gloss over, because again, rubber band theory, you're kind of crusting up the rubber band there by showing those kinds of realistic dates. But she's an interesting character for that, and it's interesting to see. It's also interesting to see this in light of the only other real interaction I've had with the Teen Titans is through the cartoon. I know it's for kids, and I watched it way too late, but it was interesting. That part was really interesting, because they try to have this, but you actually see her become more in tune with the Titans and eventually more on that way, and she's really regretful about it, but she has all these weird mixed feelings, and you almost see Slade more as an evil influence and a bad influence leading her to that instead of that. And it's interesting because both are, especially for, you know, development years, teens, seeing both sides of that coin, both those are valid and great stories, and it's sad that they can't really have two different characters to represent those two different ideals. You know, someone who's being swayed one way by things that necessarily aren't so great, but, you know, short-term gain when you're a teen is all you're seeing, versus someone who's just, for whatever reason, just rotten at that time. And really, I mean, maybe there's reforming them later, but not till, honestly, the body chemistry changes and they're not teens anymore. Because those cases do exist, and it's interesting to see that on both sides. The other interesting point that they make a point out of in the introduction and later explicitly in the comic is that, you know, they're like, Tara betrayed us, and they make a real point to say, no, she never betrayed you. She was a spy. She was working for him the entire time. And that's something, that's the kind of distinction you don't really see anymore. In a way, it just shows a kind of older sense of comics where there's less epicness in a way, which is interesting because, you know, spies are usually, you know, pretty up there, but this kind of shade of gray, despite that it is black and white, and just saying that, no, she was never part of your group. You just thought she was part of your group. You were lied to successfully. I mean, in a way, I mean, it's interesting because it shows the Teen Titans' greatest failure. They were duped. They got suckered all the way. They got played the long con, and they got screwed. I mean, by all rights, they should have lost their lives. Of course, they don't, but it's so interesting to see that, and that kind of tinge, that kind of thing that, I mean, can never be taken back. And I think that's part of the reason why this is such an enduring story, is that they don't play that, and it's never like she was a double agent or anything. She infiltrated the group, and she took them down from within. And what's really interesting about this, which is something I would have never known if not reading the introduction, is that Tara was introduced because Kitty Pryde was introduced, essentially. Again, back to that Marvel-DC dichotomy deal. And the idea was, you know, there's some pretty young girl that's a bit more relatable, a little less, you know, perfect, a bit more, you know, girl next door sort of deal introduced. If X-Men does it, Teen Titans are going to do it, but you have Marv Wolfman there say, yeah, and I knew everyone was going to, you know, point to the fact that X-Men did it, so Teen Titans did it, but he said, from the very beginning, he planned this betrayal. He said, I brought someone into the group to bring them down, whereas the X-Men just, you know, brought in a new character. And, you know, that was that. Of course, you know, bringing in Kitty Pryde on the X-Men side was a huge part of what led to the Dark Phoenix saga, one of the most definitive X-Men stories of all time. On this side, you have bringing in Tara and that whole deal, and that bring in the Judas contract, pretty much the definitive Teen Titans story of all time. And so it's really interesting to see that, and it makes me really long for that kind of rivalry again. I mean, if you want something old but new again, Marvel, DC, someone, you know, have a rivalry, you know, have some good-natured ribbing, have a little chutzpah, a little love for the game of comics, not trying to make everything into a frickin' movie. But that's a little bit of that old versus new stuff that's going around. But definitely, I've gone through it, but definitely, if you can, I imagine for most of you, revisit, if not, certainly go through and bother to read this Judas contract. It is well worth the time flipping through the pages.